2005, because of continuous several decades of communist policies, we were only 1.7 of the world economy. But in 2050, we are expected to become 16% of the world economy. So that is a 10 times or close to 10 times growth in the economy as we see it. How are we going to do this? This is not going to be business as usual, right? If we want to 16% of the world economy or more, we have to do something different. So when there's a balance of payment crisis had that happened in early 90s, the license Raj was disassembled, and then the economy kind of opened up and things got a lot better. Since then, we have not had such a cataclysmic crisis in India, but unfortunately, we seem to be reacting to crisis and then coming up with a policy. But the good news is that last year, a new education policy was launched in 2020. This basically sought to overthrow two other earlier policies that were there, which are mutated versions of the British education system in India, which started in 1835. The British basically wanted us to develop a lot of compliant clerks and employees so that they can work for the English Raj. That's not going to meet our requirements of today. If we want to achieve 10x growth in the next 30 years, what is it that we need to do? I can switch to the next slide. So in general terms, when we look at life, we always plot the individual's achievement on the x-axis and fulfillment, on the y-axis, and the fulfillment on the x-axis. What in India is that essentially we have been growing a lot of people without leadership. And even those who get into the second quadrant, the higher quadrant of achievement, which is selfish leadership, there are only some of them there. Now, that is not going to be enough of a catalyst to propel this nation into a much greater growth rate. We need to sort of move people into the fourth quadrant, which is selfless and enlightened leadership. And that's basically going to be what I'm going to be talking about today, the issues that we face and how do we need to deal with them. Many Indian students, or I should say most Indian students, even if they aspire for something different, their parents and teachers will tell them, no, become employees, go get a job. Now, even if the parents or teachers are willing to support the students, the parents or teachers don't have the real life experience. They haven't run a business, they haven't started something, they haven't innovated something. So therefore, they are unable to help this aspiration of the child or the student to get to something else. So what ends up happening is a student, when he or she graduates, they want a startup salary and work quality of a startup. They want the benefits and facilities of an MNC. They want the job security of a government position. They want the work content of a PSU. They want the job mobility of an unorganized sector. And they want the internal fulfillment of an NGO. Now, we know this is not really practical, but that is the expectation of every job seeker who comes into the market. And it's a very, very hard thing to say. Some of these are actually encouraged by the teachers themselves. In fact, in many prominent schools, when I go to hire, the first question they ask is, what new product am I going to create? Well, that is not going to really happen. Growth in technology has to be slow and steady. It has to start with grunt work, and over a period of time, you have to evolve to leadership positions and do interesting works for new products and new markets. So this requires a lot of patience that many people don't have. One of the important things that people need in order to succeed in this environment are three things. I call this the ACE model. I used to teach this to the top talent in Cisco to train them to become good innovators and create new technologies. So I'm going to share this as this one slide itself would be about an hour presentation. I'm going to make it into 2 or 3 minutes so that you can absorb the essence of what I'm trying to say, and then we can handle some of this in the Q&A. This is called the ACE model. ACE model is basically 3 things: aspiration, capability, and execution. If you don't have any one of these, an individual cannot be successful. In India, what happens is most students are extremely aspirational. They want all the things in the world. That's great. But sadly, they don't have the capabilities because the education system, as we talked about, is very regressive and kind of brings it up. National economic, the education policy is opening up a lot of things, but it still does not fix the problem that was one created earlier on. So, and these students don't have the mentorship network either to go forward. Recently, though, I'm finding a lot of young people, last 6 years, I've been working with a lot of young people, mentoring them. But what I'm finding is they do not have a penchant for it. They somehow think that if they aspire for something, success is going to come to them. I never could understand why till I had conversations with many young people, and I learned that this is a concept that many movies give young people, saying that you want something and you want it really, really, really hard, and somehow success is going to come to you. It doesn't happen in real life. You have to work for it. And some people gave me examples of real life leaders who have nearly not done anything, but whose parents have achieved something, and therefore they have become successful. So these essentially have become the role models for many young people, and they think if they aspire, that's enough. The sad part is that is not enough. You need the aspiration, you need to develop the capabilities, and you need to work very, very hard for you to be able to be successful. Next slide. There you go. So the other issue that we have in India is a bit of mixed metaphors. We mix a lot of metaphors in India. And this is one thing that I found. People confuse discovery with invention with innovation. These are 3 different. A discovery is trying to figure out a new way of doing things. An invention is a way for you to demonstrate that it can work. An innovation means that how do you take it to market and how do you make it pervasive that anybody in the world can buy and can have access to what you have created. So these are 3 different things that one needs to remember. And the focus for each of them is very. For discovery, what you need is exposure. In many cases, what I found was when I was invigilating for PhD dissertation or graduate level dissertation, most of the papers that are published in their biblio will be a bunch of textbooks. Now, you cannot learn things by just reading textbooks. So it has to be much more than that. So you need to have an exposure to something, to discover something new. For invention, you need an environment where you can experiment with something and be allowed to fail. In India, we don't allow people to fail. If a student comes home with 98% marks, the first question the parent asks is, why didn't you get the other 2? Now, you're not rewarding somebody for what they've achieved, but you're castigating them for not getting that 2% extra points. Third is innovation. For innovation, you need a strategic focus. For that, you need mentorship. You need people to tell you or show you the way forward, because otherwise you can think that you've discovered a phenomenal thing that can move heavy objects and easy to operate. And then you realize this is a wheel that has been invented several thousand years ago or innovated several thousand years ago. So these are 3 different things that require different things. Then there are different kinds of innovation models. People don't realize that innovation is not monolithic. It comes in multiple forms. At the bottommost of the pyramid is the copycat model, which is the Chinese model. They take a product, create a sell it cheap. Often the quality of the product is terrible, but because it's so cheap, people end up buying it. Second is a service-oriented localization model, which is the Indian model. We rent out people so that other people who have ideas will use these people to make something new. And these are just executors. This works very well in India with the old system of education because our whole focus was to raise and compliant employees. So this model really worked in India, as we can see in many companies that are there. Third is the Japanese innovation, where they reverse engineer a product, and the quality of the new product is so great that it's even better than the former, and it is cheaper, and the quality is better. It has more features, and the quality is better, and it's cheaper. This is the Japanese model. Then you have two Western models, disruptive and new market models. These are products which disrupt existing systems at various places in the world using mechanized gadgetry. Second thing is to sell you something that you really don't need, but you sort of get addicted to it and you can't live without it. These are the two markets coming from the West. The final one, a transformation model, which essentially transforms the lives of people, country, based on their individual need, and therefore, to get there. And this is the Atmanirbhar that the government achieved. There are very few people in this space, and this is an area where one can really get into. This slide is a very busy slide, and usually I have several quizzes at the end of this thing. But essentially, you can see here is the Chinese side of the screen. I don't know if you see my mouse moving. And then you have the Indian model on the right, low IP, both of them. And it's with this Chinese model is very local. People in China use it and so on and so forth, or local communities. The Indian model is more global, low IP. You have the Japanese model, which basically go and recreate, reinvent something, which is a reverse engineering model. Which is Huawei, Mahindra, Larsen Kubro, Mahindra, Maruti fall in this thing, Sony. Then you have the Western model, the new market, and the disruptive market, and the Cisco, Microsoft, Facebook, Cisco, Microsoft, MasterCard, and then you have the new markets, which is Apple, Twitter, Facebook, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and those kind of guys. There are very, very few. Patreon is a good example of transformational model. It's global, moderate IP, but it addresses a lot of local needs of various people. Twitter and Facebook, new products, they are the digital equivalents of Pepsi and Coca-Cola. If they go away, nobody will miss them. And you get completely addicted to it, and it's bad for your health. Okay? So that is the kind of thing, but unfortunately, the whole world is hooked on these products. The road to wisdom, how do we come to conclusion of our country, is very long. We think wisdom is monolithic. It is not. Let me break it down. So there is data that forms information. Information makes knowledge, and knowledge becomes wisdom. So the Indian system, education system, predominantly on data. And right now, the national education policy is trying to open it up to information. What we need to do is not essentially give our students data, show them where the data is, let them go get the data. We need to help them to form the data, and form them into information, and therefore make up knowledge in their mind. And then give them the tools and the capabilities to develop the intuition that is required for them to develop the wisdom. The learning process today, the way I look at it, and in my experience as well as our ancient method, essentially gets into 4 parts. All of them are equal. Self-learning, instructional learning, peer learning, and experience. These 4 are equal parts. Most of our education system focuses only on the instruction part of education, regards everything else, which is a very dangerous trend, because in this modern world, innovation by people who have never innovated. You cannot be taught business by people who've never run a business, how to run a business. So that is different. So you need to learn to develop these four things. The national education policy has broken down the instruction element to self-learning. It's included self-learning, a little bit of peer learning, but not that much experience. So it's gone a lot far. I mean, Professor Kasturi Rangan is very eminent, and there are very eminent people on the panel. They've really thought through and they've taken it to the next stage, but a lot more needs to get done. So once you've accrued all these things over here, all the knowledge that you have, you now need to absorb it. So I mean, this information from that you gathered here needs to be absorbed, and that needs to become knowledge. And once you have the knowledge and you develop intuition, then you assimilate. This is a long process that one needs to go through, and there are no shortcuts to this learning. Many people who ask me to come and talk about innovation think that I'm going to give them some kind of secret mantra and tell them how to do it. You know, there is a reason why people say that innovation is 95% inspiration. So there is inspiration element that is there, but there's a lot of perspiration that one needs to go through. This is my final slide. I'll leave you with this. There are two inhibitors to success, and I've seen that prevalent all through the country, regardless of ethnicity, language, age, caste, religion, creed, whatever you want to call it, divisions that we've created in the world. This is there through fear of failure, and then there is an indecision. So I've already given you, you are taught very well at very young age, and the system continues to promote a lack that you should not fail. If you fail, I've talked about the 98% mark issue. If you fail, you're considered not good enough. And or there is a huge amount of failure, and people are very, very scared to do new things. I think that most of the information that's coming to students today is purely based on data shoving data down their throat. So they never make the decision to assimilate it to information or to develop it as a knowledge. And therefore, they don't have the intuition to become wise about certain subjects. And therefore, the first war that they face is the Mahabharata war. A non-seasoned warrior in the Mahabharata war and expect to be successful. And this is where we need to really address. The National Education Policy 2020 is a phenomenal step forward. It removes several barriers that have been created since independence, artificial barriers, but a lot of work needs to be done at local level, at the university level, at the college level, and at the teacher level. And for that, the teachers' programs need to be created to upgrade the teachers and the college to become good innovators for students, so that we can move more and more students into to become enlightened and selfless leaders. Back to you, Harish ji. I'm done with the presentation. So, Harish.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Arvind ji. Wonderful insights about your success and the important education as well as the research. Surely it will